What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another review. This time, we're taking a look at King Kong from 1933, the original horror classic. Just to do a little preface, I was never a huge King Kong fan growing up. The only the only two King Kong movies I enjoyed were the Peter Jackson movie from 2005 and the Kong Skull Island action movie from 2017, which is part of Legendary's MonsterVerse. So that's pretty much the extent of my King Kong fandom. I never really went out of my way to watch all the King Kong movies. I always preferred Godzilla over King Kong. But fast forward to now, finally have a chance to watch the original King Kong movie, and I have to say, this movie is great. King Kong deserves all the accolades that it has gotten over the years and over the decades. In its near 90 years of existence, this movie still is being talked about. This movie still is still influencing others in terms of filmmaking. This movie still stands the test of time, and a lot of that has to go with just the filmmaking of this movie. The filmmaking of this movie was groundbreaking. Merian C. Cooper, who was the co-director of this movie, he had a large task at hand, and that task was to make a giant ape believable and to give that giant ape a personality and pathos and to make you feel sorry for it. And guess what? He accomplished all those things tenfold. King Kong has got to be one of the most underrated tragic horror films ever put to screen. This is just a giant gorilla who is brought out of his natural element into a world he doesn't understand, and the only thing that can calm him down is this human woman named Ann Dorrow, who is a struggling actress played by Fay Wray. I mean, it's a unique story. Has it been done prior since King Kong, since before King Kong? Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I haven't watched every single movie that came out before King Kong. Maybe a storyline like this happened. I have no clue. But the reason why it stands the test of time in King Kong is because it did it better, and it made you believe. And that's the most important thing about King Kong, is that it made you believe. The special effects in this movie for the time are groundbreaking. The way they use miniatures, early animatronics, stop motion, the great Ray Harryhausen, and his work with this movie, fantastic. How they're able to superimpose imagery and then have the actors interact with it was brilliant. Great stuff. I think this movie would have been awesome if it was shot in color, because just by looking at the landscapes, specifically of Skull Island, like, this movie is begging for Technicolor. Because I think King Kong would have looked absolutely phenomenal in Technicolor, to be honest with you. It would have just had this very vibrant, very vibrant, polished look to it. I think it would have come off as brilliant. But in terms of what we got here, this movie looks fantastic. Like, I love the look of Skull Island. I love the detail that went into Skull Island. I love the look of the natives, how they have this sense of barbarism to them, I should say. And the whole aesthetic of Skull Island, just very foreboding, very dark, very grim. And then you have the look of King Kong. Like, yeah, listen, when you watch it back now, it does look kind of like cheesy, but you gotta remember, in 1933, this was not seen before. This was not done before. So looking at it from that aspect, King Kong looks great for the technology that they had at the time. Of course, with modern technology, you can make King Kong look bigger and more stronger and much more athletic. But for what they're able to do with this movie was great. Another thing that made this movie work is the cast. If the cast of this movie didn't believe in what they were doing, this movie would have failed. Luckily, you had a talented cast that included Fay Wray, Robert Armstrong, Bruce Abbott, who play Ann Dorrow, Jack Driscoll, and Carl Denham, respectively. They all play their roles exceptionally well. Jack Driscoll is more or less like the captain of the ship that leads Carl Denham, who is a struggling filmmaker, to Skull Island. The whole idea of going to Skull Island is that Carl Denham is trying to make an action picture and trying to get his career off the ground. And you have Ann Dorrow, who is a struggling actress. So they all agree to go to Skull Island, where they kind of heard the legend of Kong, but don't really think much of it. It's not till they get to the island where they see that, no, the island is isolated from everything else, and it still is in the prehistoricness. Once you go beyond this big giant gate and go into Kong's domain, dinosaurs are still around. And this movie does have a lot of exciting sequences. You have the humans interacting with Brontosaurus. You have King Kong having a very entertaining fight with a Tyrannosaurus Rex. And then, of course, you get to the climax of the movie where they capture Kong, put him on display in New York, and then he does his classic rampage, climbing the damn Empire State Building with Anne in his hands before being shot down by the fighter pilots. Great stuff. Iconic imagery this movie has and still does. Now, I'll say this. The first 20 to 30 minutes can be very, very slow, since the majority of that time takes place on a boat where the characters are being established, and the threat of Skull Island and exhibition of Skull Island is being told to us. So I can see how that could be a turnoff to some people. Like, you just want to get to Skull Island, get to King Kong, get to the action. I understand that, because I'm in the same boat too. I want to get to that too. I want to get to the more interesting parts of this movie. Even though I think the first half of the movie is really, really slow, at least the actors are committed and engaged enough to make it watchable, entertaining, and it does. And Marion C. Cooper does do a good job at creating suspense, which is the most important thing that needs to be done in a movie like this. It's the creation of suspense. I thought he created that perfectly, all throughout the movie, just in general. So with all that being said, my final grade for 1933 King Kong, I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. This movie is seminal. This movie is groundbreaking. This movie set the bar for what was to come, paving the way for things like Godzilla and any other monster movie all the monster movies that came out in the 1950s during the sci-fi age. They all owe their success to King Kong, because if King Kong wasn't a success, then those movies would not have been a success, and I firmly believe that. So yeah, based solely on his historical significance alone, King Kong deserves a 9 out of 10 for me. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comment sections down below. Like the video and subscribe, and I'll check you back next time for more.